Hey everyone, welcome back to Christmas in July on iHeart Movies. My name is Jonathan North, and today Nicki is back, this time to talk about what may very well be the strangest Christmas movie I've ever seen, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. I'm not even entirely sure how I discovered this movie. I think I found it while I was down a Wikipedia rabbit hole last month, but as soon as I saw the title, I knew I had to cover it, and I knew Nicki would be the perfect guest. Now, before we get to this movie, I think I should kind of explain the plot, because Nicki and I just kind of jump into discussion, and we're kind of all over the place. And if you've never heard of this movie, you'll probably be confused. So, in this movie, both Martians and Santa Claus exist. And while humans don't know it, these Martians have been watching TV from Earth for years, and Martian children have been raised to be basically emotionless drones, but they see Santa on TV, and basically they want Santa for themselves. So the King of Mars decides to go to Earth and kidnap Santa and force him to make toys for all the Martian children instead. And there's also like a pile of side plots and side characters, including kidnapped Earth children, an evil Martian who wants to kill Santa, and an idiot Martian who's basically every useless sitcom character all wrapped up into one really, really stupid package. This movie is so convoluted and ridiculous that I'm not even sure we adequately covered in our discussion, but we've really made our best effort to do so. This was this is probably I don't know if it was like the weirdest movie I've ever seen or the worst movie I've ever seen or the dumbest movie I've ever seen.
It's a combination of all of the above, I think, honestly. And this is a side thing, but like I'm a massive Mystery Science Theater fan.
Mm-hmm.
They reviewed it, and then two offshoots of Mystery Science Theater reviewed it as well. So that goes to show how easy of a movie it was for them to take and pull apart. And you look at all three of those riffs side by side, and they do have some similarities, but every single one of those groups was able to riff on different aspects. Like there wasn't a lot of repeat jokes, except for the ones that were really straightforward. Yeah, there's nothing quite like Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
Yeah, I started watching it and I guess I didn't know what to expect. I didn't think it was going to take me that long, but I kept having to pause it because there was so many weird things that were happening.
Oh
I
yeah.
felt like I needed to make notes of just in case we wanted to talk about it. And it ended up taking like probably at least an hour longer than the movie itself because
Oh
I
yeah.
kept stopping it to write things down.
I mean, the opening song is so weird in itself. And you look at the
Yeah.
poster for this thing, and it's just like it says on the front featuring Hooray for Santa Claus. I mean, it looks at that as a proper, like, ooh, look at this thing we have.
So is that song from this movie or
It was made specifically for it, from what I've been able to see. Like, it wasn't
oh,
a song that existed previously.
the song, it felt like the opening of like those 60s 70s Disney comedies. I'm sure you've seen at least some of those.
Oh, yeah.
They always started out with like an animated sequence, even though they're live action. There was be an animated sequence with a kooky 60s, I don't know, beach vibey theme song. And that's what this felt like. And I actually kind of liked the song, even though the lyrics were it was like Sesame Street, basically. It was like how to spell Santa Claus.
Yeah, the opening is definitely that 60s animation thing that there's no other way to put it. It's a piece of its time. There's no doubt.
Mhm,
Like it came out in late like December, well around Christmas time of 64.
mhm.
But yeah, even then it was critically panned.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Like it's a weird little movie, but it's kind of endearing, but it's kind of just stupid and
Yeah,
well,
I feel like really was one of the dumbest movies I've ever watched, but it wasn't at any point one of the movies that I'm watching where I'm like, when is this going to be over? It was still watchable despite how stupid it was.
oh no, 100% agreed. And it came out like 2 years before Batman, and I'm trying to think when Star Trek started, like 67 or 68. there were vibes of both of those. Like it fit that era. Like the
Mm-hmm.
kind of goofy between the humor, because you know the humor. And you look at like the fighting scenes of which were
Really
just,
dumb fighting
oh my
scenes.
god. And even like, I guess back to the Batman thing, like there was clocks on the wall of the spaceship that said Earth time, Mars time, Jupiter time, and everything was labeled, and it had that feel of just that era. It's
Yeah,
so weird.
there was so much that made no sense, like scientifically or even narratively. It was like, my question is, who was this specifically targeting? Who was this movie written for? Because parts of it felt like it was just written for preschoolers because it was so dumb. But it was like they were trying to appeal to everybody at the same time, and I don't know. I was just confused as who they were targeting.
Well, and I kind of would have to say the same thing. I mean, the newscast narration, especially because kids of any age aren't really going to be into that. Like, that's not.
No.
There was so much like weird exposition, and
Yeah.
like the jokes were very much made for kids, and the entire thing was crazy over the top acted. So you knew that it was aiming towards that. But yeah, just some of the lessons and the things that a kid should take away from it are really above what would be. It was a real hodgepodge. Like it didn't really have a focus.
Hmm. Yeah. It made no sense in that regard. Like, I mean, narratively, stuff made no sense, but
No,
there
agreed.
was just so much everywhere in the movie that just didn't make sense. It felt like they were trying to make a cartoon, but live action, and they didn't bother hiring a good writer.
No, definitely not. Although I did see apparently this was based off of a book.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Let me look it up quick because I think on IMDb it said it was based. Oh, sorry, it was based on a story, not necessarily a book. And actually, all the actors were Broadway, like, or a good chunk of them were from Broadway. Which again, another thing, it was just like that amount of overacting, even for stage performers, seemed really over the top.
Yeah, I didn't recognize anybody in this movie. Like, there were times when I thought I did, but then I'd look them up and I'm like, I must be thinking of somebody else because their IMDb page for a lot of these people was really short.
Oh yeah. Or they did like a lot of TV stuff. Like the guy that played Droppo, the really like silly, ridiculous
Yeah.
Martian guy. He was in Uncle Wally on Sesame Street in the 80s. He was in a bunch of TV stuff. The guy that played was it Voldar?
I
The
think it
kind of
was
head bad guy
Bolivar.
with the bad mustache. He
Yeah.
was in quite a bit of TV stuff in the I think the 60s as well. So there were actors, but yeah, they were definitely like none of them had like big long resumes. None of them was
Hmm.
really super well known.
Well, that makes sense if they were more known for stage stuff, because I was like, how do you get into acting and then you only have like two credits?
Yeah.
But if they're doing stage stuff too, I guess that makes more sense.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that IMDb doesn't really show like Broadway stuff. It's only movie and YouTube stuff. Yeah, it was based on a story by Paul L. Jacobson,
Okay.
but it looks like that's all he did, according to this at least.
Well, I kind of feel, and this is a bad idea, but while I was watching it, I was like, there is potential here. And I kind of want to see somebody remake this.
It's funny you mention because there was actually a stage version of this in '93 from a Chicago theater. And it got stuck in development hell, but there was somebody tried to remake it back in like 2002 with Jim Carrey as Droppo.
Really?
Yeah. Can you imagine that being made today? Like how
No.
would it even just like thematically? There'd be no way that you'd be able to make this thing today.
If the I guess I'm thinking of somebody doing an animated movie, not necessarily live action.
I think you'd have to.
Yeah, because it's just so ridiculous. And a lot of the stuff in here, it doesn't make sense in live action. Like the whole thing with them confusing Droppo for Santa in the second half of the movie. I was like, what?
Oh man.
And I don't know if it was shot this way or if the color has just degraded over the years, But I could not tell what colors they were going for in most of this because at least the copy that I watched on Amazon Prime looked kind of gross and washed out.
On the poster they specifically say what was it? It was space blazing color. And it's like, if that's space blazing color, I think I'm going to stick to Technicolor because honestly, the greens and reds and stuff are as good as the poster. Like, it doesn't get any better than that.
I couldn't tell what color the Martians were supposed to be.
They're trying to do some kind of a green, like a greenish goldish tint, but I think what happened was they didn't apply it well enough. So it
Okay.
should have been kind of like a camo green, but it came off because it was streaky. It came off as kind of a weird like mix.
Yeah.
Like they made sure to do their hands and stuff, but just I'm sure over the course of filming, like they didn't do a good job of keeping it on.
No, yeah. I
And
think somebody mentioned green at some point in the film, and then I was like, I guess I could see that. But to me, it just looked they just looked kind of gross and dirty.
yeah,
It didn't look like they were actually a specific color. It was just weird.
no, I 100% agree. It's it's like everything else about this movie. There's you can see what they're aiming for, but it comes off slightly askew of what it should be.
Hmm.
Like the fact that you don't, and I understand they're trying to build stuff up, but the fact that you don't see Santa until probably almost halfway through the movie.
Well, you
I,
see them at the very beginning because they have that whole
oh, that's
news
right.
segment that the kids on Mars are watching.
Right, right. I forgot about that. Um,
That
yeah.
another thing about that. You see Mrs. Claus too, and I read that this is the very first appearance anywhere of Mrs. Claus in like movie or TV.
Really? Oh, that's kind of. I mean, that's the voice definitely matches for what you would expect of a
Yeah,
Mrs. Claus.
I kind of liked her. She was kind of cute, but she was also very dumb.
You are very correct, sir. You think about Mrs. Claus and like Rudolph and the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah, the thing I
Oh,
read, it said that this movie came out like 3 weeks before that special first aired.
really?
So this
Oh,
this movie beat that one for an appearance of Mrs.
oh
Claus in
God!
three
Can
weeks.
you imagine? I mean, it's never a claim that they've made as being the first time by any stretch, but being beaten out by like a low rent or a low budget, like Christmas Story.
Yeah.
God. Oh man. One other thing that I found that was really interesting, it made the 100 most amusingly bad movies of all time by the National Raspberry Award Association, so the Razzies,
Hmm.
but it was considered amusingly bad, so it wasn't outrightly bad.
I can see that. I read that it kind of regularly appears on people's even like official worst movies lists.
See, and
And I don't
I
know that
guess
I would agree that it's technically a worst movie because I feel like to be a worst movie, it has to be like painful to watch. And even though this is technically a bad movie, it was still entertaining.
yeah, no, I agree 100%. Like people's, I guess people's impressions of what makes a bad movie depends on the person.
Hmm.
Like, you look, and I'm going to tangent just a tiny bit, but like Plan 9 from Outer Space is regularly considered that. The Room is regularly considered that, but they're so amusingly bad that I don't think you can count it as that.
Hmm.
So that's personal opinion, and obviously with what I review, that makes a difference. But no, I
Right.
agree. If it's entertaining and you enjoy it, I mean, I don't think you can consider it in that realm. So.
Hmm.
Oh, so on the poster, they kind of give away the whole plot. I was kind of sad about that. You can see Martians kidnap Santa, Santa's North Pole workshop, the fantastic Martian toy factory, Earth kids meet Martian kids. Ooh. Spaceship journey from Earth to Mars, and Santa turns a Mars robot into a mechanical toy.
I feel like somebody just had a weird idea and then they quickly wrote a story around the idea
Yeah, no, I would
without
agree.
stopping to consider how the story needed to work because there was so many things that it felt like they just wrote over plot holes as quickly as they could.
Yeah. They didn't even worry about the plot holes. They're just like, oh, it adds to the decor, or it adds to the terrain. It'll make it more interesting when people drive over it.
Well, it did.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you found this, but like it reminds me of, you know, those movies where like adults, like 40 and 50-year-old adults try and write for teenagers. Like they'll try and write dialogue that they think is cool when actually they're like probably a couple years out of date. It'd be
Yeah.
like talking to a kid today about Facebook when you've got like all the other apps that are out there that our kids are more into.
Yeah.
Like that's what this reminded me of. It's like an adult trying to write a movie, like trying to write kids dialogue for a kids movie.
I think I can see that. There was a lot of it did feel sort of maybe like a few decades earlier than this, except bad.
Exactly. Like it's like idealized kid dialogue, like, oh, we
Yeah.
are going to make toys. Yay.
Yeah. And the kids were not good actors.
No.
They were basically just reciting their lines. Like, and the best kid actors were the two Martian children, and they were just basically emotionless. That was another thing. What was with the weird names? Like, I kind of liked them even though they were dumb. And I read that the kids' names at least were supposed to be, I guess, portmanteaus of girl Martian and boy Martian
Yep.
because their names were Bomar and Gurmar.
Well, and actually, the two parents and for that family too. I think it's Kimar and Momar, and that's supposed to be King Martian for the dad, and
That's what I
Mom
wondered.
Martian for the mom.
I kind of wondered about that because I think I read Mom Martian too, but I was like, well, then what is Kimar? And then it was like Ki, and then they said he was the ruler. So like maybe he's King Martian.
Yep, you
But
got
then
it.
what are the rest of them?
I don't think they did that with the rest of them. Like, I'm sure Droppo was just like a like kind of a Marx Brothers type of a ripoff.
Okay,
But
that makes sense.
the rest of them, like Voldar, and some of the other ones, I thought that maybe there was like some kind of a like a rhyming scheme, because like I remember watching this the first time and it was like Bomar, Gurmar, Momar, and Kamar, but the rest of them nothing kind of follows that. Like they're not even
Hmm.
all five. Well, I guess that most of them are five letters, but yeah, they don't really. There's nothing about them that specifically follows anything.
Yeah, it was just kind of weird, and they never said in the movie that that's what it was. I just read that, so maybe that within the Santa Claus Conquers the Martian universe, that's not the actual meaning of their names. Maybe that's
I,
just names. I don't know. It just seemed weird.
no, I get you.
But I
Generally
like the
speaking,
sound of them too. I like
oh
the
yeah.
sound of the names. Droppo, what was up with Droppo?
I'm
The
even
the
trying to.
first the first scene you see with Droppo is he's asleep and like the king, he's waking him up with, I think they called it a tickle ray.
Yep, that they did.
I was like, what? A tickle ray? And like the Martians are like this humorless people. So why would they invent a tickle ray?
Let's not forget that they also have pills that are chocolate cake and chocolate mousse.
Yeah,
So
well, the pills. What was up with the pills too? Because why are all of their food pills earth foods? Like the mother calls them like one's like buttered asparagus, hamburger, mashed potatoes. I was like, what?
my thought is that for the time at least, again, kind of the era of the space race and all that kind of stuff, they probably looked and said, okay, they're looking at possible ways to get people into space, and they have like freeze dried food now. But
Hmm.
back then they maybe said, well, what if it was in pill form or something like that? I'm sure it was probably like just a sci-fi based idea,
Yeah.
but they wanted to be able to relate it back to kids. That's why they made the food very like things that kids would know. Like if they called it like, I can't even think of a good example of just some nonsense word to describe food, like porkin or something like that. There's no easy way to do that, I suppose. So keep it simple for a kid's perspective. I mean, because if nothing else, for as complex of a thing as this movie becomes, it is still a relatively simple, straightforward plot.
Yeah, that is true. It's a very simple plot, but they throw in so much. I don't know. There's so much like exposition of things that ultimately don't even make, not even make sense. Like have a point to the plot. Like you get later with the robot. Like, what was the point of the robot? He, they
I
used
suppose
him. He did nothing.
I imagine once again it's like even with the polar bear, like the polar bear does nothing. And like it's a terrible, like it's not even a good. The dude is crawling around on all fours. He's not even like with his back legs up, so at least looks like a polar bear. I mean, I
Yeah.
think the robot, especially again, and I'm just thinking like of that era, like everything was kind of high tech and stuff, and they did what they could with like a cardboard box and silver paint.
Hmm.
I
It,
don't know.
it just felt like I don't even know what it felt like. They threw in this robot that ultimately had zero effect on the plot. They hyped it up like it was this technological marvel weapon that was going to be their thing to get Santa. And then when they get to the North Pole and send in the robot, he becomes a toy for some reason. Like he doesn't like shrink or anything. He just stops working and they're like he he's become a toy. And I was like, what does that even mean?
and
Santa
and
didn't do anything to him. He just
and
walked
maybe
into the workshop and suddenly he's a toy. I
well, and I
suppose maybe
wonder
that
too.
made sense to kids. I don't
Well,
know.
and I wonder if maybe that was the quote unquote magic of Santa. Like, but that doesn't explain like if that's the case, then everything else that comes into that setting should become, playful and fun. It shouldn't just affect the robot.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it even made the front cover of the poster.
Yeah, I expected this robot to be a thing in this movie. And he was there for like two short scenes.
Yeah.
They used him to retrieve the kids because they kidnapped some children from the woods. Like these kids are just in the woods for some reason, and they kidnap them and use them to find Santa Claus at the North Pole. The kids escape, and they send the robot after them, and then they send the robot after Santa, and then the robot is nothing more in the movie.
He
They
basically
leave
gets
him at the
left.
North Pole.
Yeah. Well, he could be, he helps Mrs. Claus since Mr. Claus is gone. I mean, everybody needs a good helper around the house. It might as well be a giant, weird cardboard robot, I
Yeah,
guess.
that makes as much sense as most of the things in this movie. So
You're not wrong. Even I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Oh, the sage, like they
that's what that was
on
what I was going to say too.
yeah. Oh my God.
What
So
was your thing?
so his name actually means like it's a corruption, or they pronounced it wrong, but apparently I think it's Chochum
Yeah,
was the name of.
Chochum the Ancient One.
Yeah, and he's like that's in Hebrew. I think it's supposed to be sage, but they pronounced it wrong. So, but yeah, that whole scene, it's like, what kid is gonna understand like prophecy and where they need to go? Why couldn't like they just see? Oh, hey, look, there's a dude that's bringing joy to people. Let's go grab him.
Yeah, the that was just like with the robot. He was there for a scene. He made zero effect on the plot, and then he was gone. They basically just needed him to tell them what to do when what they needed to do, well, they didn't need to do it, but what they were going to do was obvious, which was kidnap Santa. They didn't need this old weird man to tell them that they needed to go to Earth. And also, he was like, he'd been to Earth and he said something about he's seen this coming for centuries. I was like, what? What? What have you seen coming for centuries? The children needing Santa Claus? And he also was another thing where he was sort of a bunch of plot exposition. You're talking about the thing that they do to children. Like apparently the children are hooked up to their teaching thing when they're born, and by the time they can walk, they're adults, even though they have children's bodies. And that's why I said that I feel like as a science fiction idea, there's stuff in here that really has potential,
Right.
but they've used it in such weird ways.
And the thing that they kept coming back to, and everywhere that I looked, I couldn't find confirmation one way or the other. But the way that you've got like on one side Voldar, and then on the other side you've got what the heck is his name? The king,
Emar.
Kimar. And there's two very opposing ideals. On one side,
Hmm.
you've got someone that's trying to change and let kids be kids and make things more fun. And then on the other side, you have a very strict kind of look. And if you
Hmm.
look at the 60s as an era, it's very much like you have this sort of militaristic, very, children are to be seen and not heard mentality. That
Hmm.
was, I mean, to that point, it seemed like very much a thing. And then you've got this very kind of more loose 60s era of stuff that was coming. And that is sort of a bash or a clashing of ideals to
Hmm.
some extent. And I don't know if that was meant to be or not, but
It
it's
probably
mentioned,
influenced it. Whether or not they did it on purpose, I don't know. But
right?
I'm sure that was what influenced the two ideals.
Yeah, like you say, there is good ideas in here, but it's yeah, it's just weird how they did it, and it wasn't even a budgetary thing.
Hmm.
It was literally just the way it was written.
Yeah. Something that was a budgetary thing, though. Half of the time, well, probably every time, they had the news after the initial invasion, after the children and Santa have been kidnapped. The news comes on to give updates, and there, at least in one instance, there's B-roll of like spaceships launching and stuff that goes on for far too long. It's like they probably got this footage really cheap somewhere and then just kept using it. And every time the news is on, they put more of this footage in. It's like pilots getting into airplanes and airplanes flying through the air. And like it has nothing to do with the movie. And I thought that they were sending astronauts to Mars the way that the news was talking. But then nothing ever comes of it. Like you've got all these ships launching, rockets launching, pilots getting ready for to go to Mars. It seemed like, and then they never do.
Yeah, it was a strange thing. And I know like halfway through, because the thing that stopped the, Earth people from being able to see the Martian craft was that like a cloaking device or something. And
That.
the kid manages to, by randomly pulling wires, he manages to unhook the cloaking device, but then it gets
Yeah.
re-hit or it gets re-initialized later. So I don't know if it was a case of like that was kind of the reasoning of, but that's why they couldn't find them. But even then, that's such a subtle thing in what is a very much hit you over the head type of kids movie. I don't know. It almost it that like you say, there's stuff that goes nowhere. There's so much stuff that doesn't lead anyplace.
Yeah, and with that radar thing, they were talking about they got spotted by Earth radar or something, and then the Martians say something like that Earth's radar beams are bouncing off our ship. And then Kimar's like, well, it certainly took them long enough. Turn on the radar shield. And I'm like, if you had a radar shield this whole time, why didn't you turn it on when you went to Earth so you wouldn't be spotted? It's like they wanted to be spotted. He's like, well, it certainly took them long enough.
Oh yeah, I can't. Yeah, like you say, there's dialogue in this that it defies like half of what Voldar says. It doesn't make any sense. It's just
Mhm.
it's just word salad. Like, and they
Yes.
pull out so many. I don't have any good examples of it, but they pull out all this technical mumbo jumbo, which I'm sure at the time sounded really fancy.
Yeah, no,
But
anytime they were in like their ship, the word salad is the perfect description because it was just them just blabbering on about random stuff that it was just like they were putting sci-fi words together.
they absolutely were. It was like oh, the electric interocitor thing over there, and yeah, just everything was nuclear too. I love that. Like
Yes.
that, so much of the era was that just fits so much. I laughed every time I heard it.
Yeah. It's like they picked out some words that they thought sounded sci-fi and then they just used them however they could.
Absolutely, absolutely. There were some interesting kind of like little deals on the side that I thought was kind of cool. Like the idea of saying that and you could see it from a parent perspective, because I know parents now that have kids that question like, all the bell ringer Santas and stuff. Well, is that Santa? And you'll always hear that's Santa's helper. And the fact that they kind of address that like as one of their lines, I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, I thought I wanted them to just start kidnapping random innocent Santas off the street. That would have been great.
And then they just toss them out into space. Well, this one's not it. Nope. This one, nope. And there's just like a line of Santas like floating in outer space, frozen.
I
And
was thinking that they would just get a bunch of Santas and bring them back to Mars, just and confuse the other Santas. Why are you stealing us? We're not really Santa, but nobody believes them.
I have to talk about the fights because those are so epic. Like, it makes Star Trek the original series look subtle by comparison. Like, just the angles and the way that it was done was just so silly.
Yeah, you could tell that they weren't hitting each other. It was just they were trying to fake it with camera angles and camera movements. It was so bad.
And the fact that Voldar, like the mustache, like the fact that he was the only, there was another guy with a beard, but he was the only guy with a mustache, and of course he was the bad guy. Like he had the whole like dastard or Dick Dastardly thing going on.
I didn't even think of that, but you're totally right.
Like everything about him, I just kept, and not that I didn't know Dick Dastardly a lot, like as a kid, but like from what I remember seeing, it just everything about him, all that was missing was like a mustache twirl.
Yeah. No, he started out seeming like some sort of formidable foe because you have him. I mean, technically at the beginning he's sort of on the side, but he's like on the side of Kimar because he's one of, I don't know, he's like an advisor or some other high government official, whatever. But then you realize that he's not in on this plan at all, and then he's trying to flush Santa and the kids into space. That was that whole thing. That was another. I technically it's a plot hole, but it was creative in the dumbest way possible, and I kind of loved it. They had Santa climb up an airlock that was really small, and you just accept it because Santa can go up chimneys. They didn't show it; they just told you that's what happened, and it was
Well,
so
that's the
dumb.
thing.
But I loved it.
Oh man, yeah, and that's the kind of stuff. Or even Billy, the little human or the little Earth guy, like he talks before Voldar puts him into
Yeah.
the airspace or airlock. He does this entire like spiel about how the whole thing works,
Yeah.
and the explanation for how he knows all this is that he wants to be an astronaut, and it's just like you're 10.
Yeah. 10-year-olds can be smart, but like even if he's read about spaceships, which I'm assuming that's what they are saying, that he's read about spaceships,
Yeah.
why is it that his knowledge lines up exactly with how the Martian spaceship works?
Secret plot twist that was left on the cutting room floor was he was actually half Martian.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Either that or the Martians are actually humans that moved to Mars thousands of years ago, and now they've evolved to be this dirty, muddy green color.
Oh my god, I was trying to figure out if the antennae, like the hat, the helmets and
Yeah,
stuff.
I had the same thought. Is it part of them or what?
Like it almost, the antenna go up and down like at the very beginning. Droppo, like one of his antenna gets pulled up, and
Yeah.
they have hair underneath there too. So it's, yeah, I don't think they put a lot of thought in. I don't think they thought about Martian anatomy when they were putting
No.
the outfits together. I'm pretty sure.
No, I guess this is another thing that I wanted if they remake it. I want this explored is what is up with the things on their heads, because to I'm like analyzing this from the beginning, like because they're talking about like the old sage Chochum or whatever his name was is talking about the children as soon as they're born they have this learning machine hooked up, and I'm like, is the thing on their heads the learning machine? And then so are they basically cyborgs now? Like they're basically human until you put this mechanical thing on their head, and then this mechanical thing teaches them things, and it's also how they all communicate. So I
And it
want,
also turns them green, muddy green.
even if they're born green, I just feel like I want more lore of this universe.
You know what? I'm sure that somewhere on fanfiction.net,
Oh,
there's
probably.
probably some kind of fan fiction about Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. I
I
guarantee you.
I wouldn't doubt it.
One other thing I found interesting, and again, obviously they're probably trying to go for some kind of a militaristic like understanding, but like Kimar had the little triangular patch on his uniform that was one, and then it had like the squiggle things underneath. You look at Momar and she's got like two on hers, but then she has like a female symbol on the little patch thing.
I did not even notice this.
And I didn't notice it. I guess I didn't even think about looking at the daughter if she had it, but they both had skirts on, so I'm assuming that that's probably part of the uniform or their normal attire or whatever.
No, I didn't notice that at all. Oh, one other thing that I found so weird. The news report, after Mrs. Claus had identified the kidnappers as Martians, they were talking about the UN plotting a course of action. And then there was this line, something along the lines of, never in the history of the world have the nations come together with such unanimity. And I'm like, to rescue Santa and two children, that's what brings the world together.
Hey, Santa is a world unifying force, even if a lot of people don't celebrate Christmas.
It's so weird.
But that is sort of writing of that era. I think like things were written like in a very like global perspective kind of a thing without really being global. Like you think about Star Trek or I don't know,
Yeah.
even Batman. Like they did have that kind of verbiage. Like it's big and fancy and just like all encompassing, even though it really wasn't.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're thinking globally, but also only about America.
In that respect, yeah, I think so. Like, the and they're placing such a great importance as Santa as like a world. And again, I think we're thinking about this a great deal more than they did.
Yeah.
But that idea of Santa as kind of a universal good. Like I think
Hmm.
that's how they're kind of playing Santa here. Like he is this not God by any stretch, but like this just figure of just all good, even though
Hmm.
he tells terrible, terrible jokes.
Yeah. This- Him trying to entertain the children with jokes. I was entertained by how horrible the jokes were and by how completely unresponsive the children were.
Oh, I know. What's the matter, kids? Um, yeah, it's because we're really sad. We want to go back to Earth.
And
Nothing to do with the fact that the jokes were atrocious.
and speaking of Santa making jokes and the way he laughed,
Oh God.
I part of me was trying to figure out, like, is this before it had been, I guess, canonized that Santa says ho ho ho? But then later in the movie, they're making jokes about ho ho ho, and it might have been mentioned in the song. I can't remember, but the way he laughs in not just that scene, but like later when he reveals to have escaped the being flushed into space by climbing up the shaft, he comes in and he's like, ha, 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 Merry Christmas. Like, he sounds like he's doing an evil laugh almost.
Oh man, the yeah, and the Santa laugh. I can't tell if that was like you look at it like there's one scene where Santa and all the kids are laughing hysterically. And you look
There's
at it
more
and
than
go,
one.
okay, is that like a really fun, like lighthearted laugh, or is that like a maniacal, we're gonna kill some people laugh? Because I couldn't tell. Like from a 2020 perspective, you look at it and you go, man, that's really devious. But at the time, was that considered really cute? Or was that just like, we're gonna sit over here because I don't trust you?
I think it was just the fact that the script called for them to laugh and they weren't in a fun mood, so they just pretended and it did not translate.
That is true. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Oh man. But even with the jokes, I wonder, like I would be interested to know like kids back in the 60s like what they would have seen as these Santa jokes. Like we look at them now and go, "Ah, funny." But how did they perceive them, I wonder?
I want to say they would have liked them. because I remember being like probably the age of the children in the movie, and I would get joke books from the library that were dumb. And I loved them. And I would tell them to people. And looking back, they were as dumb as the one Santa was telling. So they probably were entertained.
I would imagine that makes sense. Well, even Droppo is a character. I mean, he's such a like he's like the Marx brother that the Marx brothers don't talk about kind of a level, and just that slapsticky, like
Yeah.
weird joke guy. I mean, when he puts on the Santa suit, and I suppose that needs to be explained true too. So Droppo is kind of like the comic relief of the movie. Um, and at one point, like he's constantly screwing things up, but he's always on the kids' side. Like he rescues them at one point,
Hmm.
keeps them safe. So he is like a guardian of sorts. But at one point he decides he wants to be Santa, so he puts on this extra suit, throws a pillow down his front, and then puts on a beard and like tosses a hat over top of his cranial helmet thing. Then becomes at the very end he becomes Martian Santa.
Droppo Claus.
There you go.
I'm pretty sure they even called him that.
Did they?
Either
I
that
don't
or
even remember
Santa
that.
Droppo or something like
Oh
that.
god. Well, Droppo Claus sounds a little bit more consistent than.
Yeah. I think it was Droppo Claus. I
Thank God.
can't remember. It was, to me, it was obvious that from the beginning, that he was going to end up being the Santa of Mars,
Oh yeah.
because as soon as he started being interested in the Santa suit, I was like, "Yep, that's how this is going to end."
Oh yeah.
I guess we could talk about what happens when the kids actually get to Mars, because there was weird stuff here too.
Oh yeah. There was a ton of weird stuff. Like kind of, well, the whole movie is weird, but yeah, that things get very strange at that point.
One thing that really stood out to me was when they first get to Mars, the children who are from Earth greet the mother, Momar, like they know how to talk to Martians. Like they bow and touch foreheads. Like that's how the Martians greeted each other. But then they go in to see the kids, and it's like they forgot that. They try to shake hands, and the kids are confused. Like, why are you giving me your hand? I'm like, you just greeted the mother the way you're supposed to greet people on Mars. Why didn't you do that for the kids too?
Well,
And
kids.
also, who taught them that?
Well, it's, kids slang is a little different when you're talking between different planets. You greet someone properly when show respect to adults, but when you get to the kids, you gotta do the secret handshake or whatever.
I guess so. That was another instance of word salad, I guess, because before the Earth kids enter the Martian kids' room, the children are studying, and their version of studying is they're lying in their beds listening to this robotic voice reciting like mathematical nonsense. And it was all stuff that was probably made up. It was like they were throwing in some math terms and some scientific terms and talking about the angle of Jupiter, and it was weird.
This is kind of a random side thing, but when they set up eventually a workshop on inside the palace, I guess, or inside Kimar and Momar's home,
Yeah, they
and
set it
it's
up basically the next day. It was like, how
yeah,
did they set this up so fast? They arrive
they're
and then
just that
suddenly
good.
it's Santa workshop.
But they have the kids doing all the they're doing all the work. Like there's no elves; it's all just kids. It's
Yeah,
like they don't have very good Russian or Martian labor laws, do they, for kids?
no,
I mean, they
that
were
that whole
working.
factory was so strange too.
Oh yeah.
It was like a conveyor belt that was just slowly shooting off toys, and the children were catching them, and they looked like laundry
They
baskets.
were laundry baskets. And even after like they'd say like two dolls and a baseball bat and a truck, and they just toss them all into the same bin. Like they get them in the
Yeah,
things, and then they'd all go into the same bin.
yeah. Like, how are you keeping track of whose toy is whose? And also, why do the Martians want baseball bats? Do they have baseball on Mars?
Well, the gravity. Well, I suppose gravity is sort of similar to Earth. I was gonna say if you had really easy or light gravity, you could really hit a ball far, but that may
Even
not be the case.
even the dolls and the teddy bears don't make sense, because like, unless Mars has bears, the teddy bear didn't make sense, and the dolls were human. Like the dolls did not look like Martian dolls.
That's kind of a fun callback thing too, because at the very beginning, they actually did thank. They had special toys made for the movie, like in the opening credits, there was a thing that said special thanks to whatever toy company for making the toys for the movie. They weren't even well showed off. I mean, you didn't,
No.
besides the baseball bats, you really didn't get a good look at any of the toys.
And really the toys, I feel like it's another missed opportunity to really get creative, because especially later when Voldar puts his other plan into action, which is to sabotage the factory, at which the sabotage consisted of him taking two plastic wrenches and sort of waving them over the wires in the control panel, which
It was all
apparently messed it up.
it was mechanical or magnetic. It was all magnetic. They just
Okay.
ran those over top of there, and that's why it worked.
Anyway, the way that this supposedly messed it up was all the toys, the bits of the toys started getting mixed up. And the first time it happened, I was like, this has potential to be really creative, because the doll came out with the bear's head and the bear came out with the doll's head. And I was like, yeah, this is like Sid from Toy Story. But then it was like the next thing was like a baseball bat with a tennis racket attached. And then it's like, this is like Sid from Toy Story if Sid had zero imagination.
Or ambition. You could have all the imagination in the world, but no ambition to make it work. Like, you know what? I could make a doll with a crane hand. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to, throw these two pieces together and call it good.
Yeah, I wanted some more weird toys, and I wish that they would have done that. That's another reason that I want a remake, so that somebody can make some weird toys when the machine is sabotaged.
That would be cool. Well, and again, just like Batman, everything was labeled like ball, bat, there was a
Yeah,
doll, there was like a train. Then it had control panel in big, bold letters.
that should be another question that I didn't even cross my mind while I was watching it. Why did the Martians write and speak in English?
Well, it gives credence to the idea that they're from Earth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think with Chemchin, was he like he didn't have the headgear, did he? Like he had big long hair, but he didn't have the headgear, right? I don't even remember.
I think you're right. I
Like,
I think you're right. So
let
the
me go
headgear
back and
has to be something that they've added to themselves.
right. Let me check real quick. Just to check, because I am actually very curious as to if it was or not. Oh, that's a thing too. They reused the cave from Chemchin, and then that's also where Voldar and the bad guys went. It's the exact same cave.
Okay. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, he doesn't have the headgear.
That this is why I say there's so much potential in this, because I feel like there's a story here. They have, whether it's accidental or on purpose, they have set up this universe that has potential for a really interesting backstory. And I
Oh,
want
very
more of it. I just don't want it to be dumb.
Yeah, you're right. And even for the time, I mean, there was some very interesting points and some interesting commentary and stuff. And to
Mhm.
not take advantage of some of that, I don't know. It's kind of strange.
We were talking about the cave, and
Right.
this is where they go after they kidnap Droppo. But my question is, why do they think that Droppo is Santa Claus? Because Voldar just spent however long it takes to get to Earth and then back to Mars with Droppo. And suddenly Droppo puts on a Santa suit and he can't tell the difference between him and Santa Claus, even though he knows him quite well. I was, why? Because Voldar seemed formidable at the beginning, and suddenly he's an idiot.
Yeah.
There's no other way to think about this. He's an idiot if he can't tell the difference between Droppo and Santa Claus.
Well, and even the way he says, because he can't, like, he doesn't ever say anything besides "ho ho ho" when he's in the Santa suit.
Yeah, as weird.
It
It's
was.
another plot hole that they just wrote it and kept going.
Well, and here, and I wrote that down too, because it's one of two things: either A, they're that stupid, or B, like
I think
there's
so.
there's the old joke about how like amongst like squirrels, like all squirrels look alike, but it's like to human or to Martians, all humans look alike kind of a deal. So they couldn't tell like Droppo from Santa, but I'm thinking that's probably far too in depth for what we're talking about here.
No, because like I had the same thought, but then I was like, no, because Santa is human, Droppo is Martian.
And he's clearly like that weird kind of greenish, goldish color. I did love at one point when the kids got kidnapped, the kid insults Kimar by saying to him, "You Martian!"
I noticed
That's
that
just
too.
it's like wow. That's both incredibly generic and incredibly offensive.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, is that supposed to be like veiled racism? Let's talk about the end.
Absolutely. Oh god, the end.
the You have the whole thing. Their plan sort of unravels because for some reason they leave Droppo in the cave with the controls that control the nuclear curtain. We mentioned before they refer to nuclear things. Like this nuclear curtain, it's not something that ever appears on screen. I guess it's an invisible force. And they say if you touch it, you get disintegrated. But they just leave him in the cave with the controls and he turns them off. It's like, what did you expect? This is another reason why Voldar is an idiot.
We could go on for hours talking about why he's an idiot. I mean,
Yeah. But they head back to the workshop and they're going to try and negotiate with Kimar to get Santa's freedom. But then they see that Santa's already there, and for some reason, they just immediately give up. They put their hands in the air because, I don't know.
The power of Christmas. Let's just say the power of Christmas.
Sure. And then they get locked in a closet, but instead of locking them in the closet, Kimar goes in with them. I don't know why. And then they have another weird fight scene.
Oh,
And
that one's spectacular. That's like A level bad fight right
yeah,
there.
like hardly anything happens and he's out.
Yep.
So then they escape. And then Santa and Billy and Betty and Bomar and Gurmar, they have this plan to, I guess, Home Alone style take out the villains, except it's bad. They all just sort of weirdly attack him when he enters the room with all the toys. And that goes on for a long time. I can imagine that they thought that kids were going to love this, and they just draw that out for as long as they can milk that scene. And it's so weird because the camera really gets into it too. It's like zooming in and out and shaking, and it's like trying to make it this frantic scene, and it was just weird. It took forever. And also,
then
this is where Santa's laughing maniacally again.
There's so much about this movie you look at, and I don't know, like older movies I feel like are easy to judge, but this one kind of sits as one of those things where it's not like a Disney level movie. It's not like the worst thing you've ever seen as far as kids entertainment, but it falls in that weird middle ground where would this have been cool to kids in the 60s, or would this have just been like one of those weird things you get dropped off at on a Saturday before Christmas to watch because there's nothing else to do?
I don't know. I kind of want to show this to a kid and see what they think of it.
Oh god.
Maybe
Kids
when my nephews are older.
there you go. They're more equipped to handle Martians in like muddy greenish brown attire.
Yeah. It would be interesting to know what kids of the time thought of this.
It would be, yeah, and it's hard to. I mean, I don't think I know this. Like some of the things that I looked at, this was shown regularly around Christmas, but I don't know if it was like a specific area, say like New York, Chicago, or what.
This doesn't seem like something that would get regular airtime. It feels like something that would fade into obscurity the second it premiered.
Well, and I couldn't really find anything about its past. Like it was like the copyright on it was open. So it's been copied several times and shown several places. So maybe it was like It's a Wonderful Life where because not the fair use of
Public
it, but the
domain.
public domain. Yeah, it was public domain. So for a lot of studio or a lot of broadcast stations and stuff, it would have been something that would have been easy to air, kind of like It's a Wonderful Life. Only obviously doesn't
Yeah.
have the historical pedigree that It's a Wonderful Life has.
Yeah. That makes sense though.
Yeah,
Because if you can find something that's public domain, especially these days,
no doubt.
there's hardly anything public domain anymore.
No, not in that particular respect.
But we should talk about the very end.
Yes.
Because after the fight slash attack, toy attack, Drapo comes in, Kimar comes in, they stop the fight, and I guess they just decide that since Drapo looks like Santa, they'll just have him instead of the real Santa. And I think Santa says something like that they don't need him, they have a Santa of their own. and and then Santa leaves with the kids. They go home. But like they also don't have a driver. So did Santa fly the spaceship home to Earth?
Well, at the very beginning, Santa says that he doesn't do any of those newfangled rocket sleds. He sticks to the reindeer, and then proceeds to completely screw up the reindeers' names.
And calling one of them Nixon.
Yeah. Subtle thing that was happening down the road. Maybe it foresaw the future. Oh boy. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in theory, yes. But one of those questions that a remake we'll have to wait for a remake to be able to tell us how that all turned out.
I really do want a remake. I'm not actually just saying that as a joke. I actually do want somebody to remake this. I was somebody who has a budget who is gonna like CGI, like good CGI. Sony should do this because they could do like what they've did for Into the Spider-Verse.
There you go.
Give
There
it
you
to
go. I
Sony
like
to
that.
do their thing on. I want a good version of this story.
It could actually be really good, especially the messages still translate today. I mean, because there is a cultural shift happening now, like there was at that point in time, and there are things that you could play into that, both from a fun perspective, but also kind of a lesson perspective, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Could be interesting.
Yeah, I think that in the right hands, this story could be something. Well, it is something now, but
It's
it
a
could
thing
be
that
something
exists.
more.
All right, but if a remake is made, it has to have this specific joke in it because this is like the greatest joke ever. What's round, soft, put on a stick, toasted in a fire, and it's green?
No, that was so dumb.
A Martian mellow.
And the Martians thought that was hilarious. That's another thing. I mean, technically, I guess they have the same foods, but like, why? So, why is it? Why did they understand the joke? They shouldn't even know what a marshmallow is. But at
No,
the
it's a
same time, they
Martian
shouldn't know
mellow.
what
That's
hamburgers are. They shouldn't know what chocolate layer cake is. But they got pills for all of those things. So.
Well, again, it goes back to the idea that they were from Earth and then they went to Mars, and then
Yes.
over the course of centuries became something different.
Yes. I love this idea. I want that to be part of the lore. They need to include that in the remake.
I 100% agree in that. Like, trying to sum up what this movie is, there's really no easy way to sum it up because it's just you could say things about it, but they don't cover what this movie is.
No. It's this movie is so many things.
Like, even trying to break it down, like, it's, Martians don't know Christmas, Santa comes there and tries to help. Like, the title doesn't even really reflect what it
No.
is.
I thought that too. I was like, when is Santa gonna dominate all these people?
He enslaves all of them, they start making toys. It's a movie that has been maintained its popularity because it's so weird.
Yeah.
Like, nothing about it fits. Like, the poster doesn't fit the title doesn't fit the story. The story is all over the place, but there is something endearing about this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not something that's boring. You don't look at your watch and go, well, when is this over?
Mm-hmm.
It is a very entertaining but incredibly silly and goofy ride.
Yeah. No, it is definitely not a good movie, but It is extremely watchable.
That's the classification for a good bad classic right there.
And I've never even felt like I'm the type of person who likes watching bad movies just for the entertainment value, but I mean, if they're like this, I suppose I could become one.
I can guarantee you from my own personal experience that there's a lot of them that are.
Well, I'll probably have to maybe enlist you to help me find some more.
Most certainly.
Well, I guess that's probably enough on Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
Well, I do hope you enjoyed it. It is, like I say, it's definitely a unique kind of movie. And I mean, what else can you say besides hooray for Santa Claus?
Yeah. That song was pretty catchy, though.
It was.
Well, I guess since we're at the end, do you want to let people know where they can find you if they want to get more of your content?
Oh, absolutely. You can find more excellent content like Santa Claus Conquers the Martians on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/trivial theater, and theater is spelled just ER. I'm also on Twitter at trivia_chick, and that's chick without a K.
Okay. Well, I guess that'll be all for now, but I think we'll have you back in the future because I know there's a lot more stuff we can talk about.
Oh, absolutely. It's been so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. And Merry Christmas in July.
Yes, Merry Christmas in July. Thanks to Nicki for joining me on this episode of Christmas in July on iHeart Movies. If you want more from her, I'll have her links in the description below. She covers all sorts of strange and obscure movies on her channel, so if you like this episode, make sure to check her out. Next time on iHeart Movies, we're doing another Christmas in July podcast with the Hallmarkies. Rachel Wagner is back, and this time she's bringing her co-host Cammie, and we're going to be talking about two new Hallmark Channel films that they've chosen for me, Fur Crazy and Once Upon a Christmas Miracle. It's always fun to talk with the Hallmarkies, so I'm really excited about this one. And if you're into all things Christmas and want even more Christmas in July content, then make sure you check out my other podcast, Every Version Ever. This month, we're looking at different versions of A Christmas Carol, and we're having a lot of fun with it. Saul Carlos and I talked about Disney's 2009 version last week, and this week, Sarah and I are talking about the 1984 version. So thanks for joining me here on iHeart Movies, and we'll see you next time for more Christmas in July.